Hello. Job done for today, or this part of the job. Be driving into the sun again. Alright, so Christmas. The lawyers tell me that, there's no progress. There's nothing. Everything's still status quo, despite what the kids are telling me about how I should be really happy because everything will be gone away soon. And that just continued. And all I could focus in on were two things, sanity is one of them. I work like a dog in the elephant. I just, as much work as I can do, as much clearing as I can do. And we actually got to the point where the basement was clear enough and functional enough that I could lay new flooring down. That was great. That was a huge momentous moment. All the progress that I made in the elephant during this time, it was like I was thinking, okay, eventually my kids are going to come live with me when this is all done and dealt with. I kept on that hope and that focus, thinking I'm making room for my kids, so I have to clear this space. I have to, make them bedrooms and make it healthy environment for them, welcoming environment. The elephant had a lot of flaws, so I paid to have linoleum laid down on the basement floor because I thought that would be the best solution, the cheapest solution for the problem. Money was always an issue. Even now it's an issue again. I was working. The German kids that were living with us were a good distraction, but they did help a little bit. Julian was going to school. He was going to a new school. I was driving him to school every day for his safety. He had his own stuff going on. Victoria was living with us already at this point. So Victoria actually got to know a lot of stuff. That's why the other day in the car when I was driving her, she was able to contribute, and she was witness to most of this. Not all of it. There was some stuff that she was living. She moved back and forth quite a bit. But anyway, January rolls around, and we're still in the thick of it, but there's talk about meeting with the Crown Attorney, and the lawyers meeting with the Crown Attorney, and presenting evidence, including the letter from my counselor. And the Crown Attorney was just ignoring everything. All the evidence that was being given to her, and this is what was really frustrating, was there was no history for me of any violent crime, but yet there was a legal history for my ex. Lots of stuff that could be interpreted, and yet that was ignored. And it got very frustrating with the Crown because she wasn't willing to listen to the truth at all. She was just hell-bent on taking this to trial, it seemed. And eventually, in late January or February, my ex actually did come forward and somehow manipulated the situation. Now, what he tells me or told me and the truth are always two very different things, but Supposedly, if the Crown charged him with obstruction of justice and all the other things that he was guilty of, it tells me the kids would have ended up in children's aid because both of us would have had charges pending against us. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. And actually, it wasn't too long ago, I was reviewing all my legal emails from that time, and there I found an email that stated from the Crown to my lawyer, my criminal lawyer, stating that X had never come forward to drop the charges. There has been no communication. They've been trying to get a hold of him, and they had no success in getting a hold of him. So there's a lot of contradictory statements being made as to how this went down. I only know the end result. I have no idea why he was never held accountable for something that he clearly did and admitted to doing. And I was treated as such that I was, as a criminal, by the system, by society, and I never received an apology for anything. X now refers to that time. What happened was, it was an accident. He told the children that he tripped. He told a number of different stories of how this all played out. My story has never changed. When it's the truth never changes. Somehow he manipulated everything, and God knows why, but nobody ever paid attention. As far as the legal system is concerned, nobody ever paid attention to what I had said and had been saying and had never changed about saying it. And how nobody had looked at the notes, the text messages, the contacts that he made, the things that he had done, and saw that as the abuse that it was. March 2018. It took over 8 months for my charges to finally be dropped against me. It was a great day, but it was a brutal day too. Shortly after the charges were dropped, I get a text message from X that was ambiguous enough to make me believe that he is attempting suicide. And at this time, I didn't have full knowledge of narcissistic personality disorder or the extremes that they would go to. I can only guess that it was a way of him baiting me to come back to the house and be in the same physical space as him again. I had no choice but to call the police and ask them to do a safety, a safety check on him. I explained to them about the text message I had received. I did not respond to it. And I asked them to go do a check on him, and I had to explain the text message. Sorry, there's a crazy guy racing on the 401 here. I had to explain to them the text message, the contents of the text message, and they said, yes, that's questionable enough that we should do a check. And I told them, the long and short of what was going on and why I can't be there. And so, of course, they got there, and what was reported back to me was that there was medication spread all over. He was passed out on the couch, and the police officer had to ask me, who would have found him? And I said, the kids. They would have come home from school. They would have walked home eventually, and they would have found him, and the police officer was pissed. They took him by ambulance. My lawyer assured me that it would be 72 hours that he'd be in hospital for observation, minimum 72 hours. He had left me a note, which looked like a goodbye letter, and an admission of guilt. Still have that on file, too. And so I grabbed the kids. I got into my house. That was my only opportunity, according to all the lawyers. It was my only opportunity to get inside my house safely without him there. Grab all the kids' things, change the locks, bring my kids and the dog, because they had another dog at that time, because remember, Daddy bought them a puppy. The puppy that, that's another story too. But yeah, I had 72 hours supposedly to deal with all this. And I made the most of it in the first 24 and did everything possible that I could. Grabbed the kids, brought them back to my mother's house. Now this is March break. This is the beginning of March break of 2018. And my kids didn't expect any of this, and I couldn't tell them what was happening with their father other than their father is in the hospital and he needs a few days off. They didn't understand. I could not tell them the truth about all of it. He must have talked to, I don't know why he wasn't in 72-hour hold, but he was released after 24 hours. He manipulated the situation, and I was told it was a legal obligation for the hospital to hold him for 72. Somehow he said that he must have just taken too many of his painkillers, which during our whole time knowing him, he was not able to take painkillers. That's why he was smoking so much weed. And it was an accident. Tell all. The truth. So they released him after 24 hours. And now I have 2 children who are with me that don't want to be with me. Fighting, screaming, crying, wanting to go home to their home, which is my house, the house I live in now. There's absolutely no reason for them to not want to be with me. And other than whatever crap was told them. I had every legal right to have my children with me. I had every emotional need to, as a mother, to be with my children and help them heal. My kids had cell phones at this time. Again, my daughter was 10 years old at this point. Little young, again, like I said, there was so much undermining as a parent. I didn't even have my daughter's cell phone number. I didn't even know about this cell phone until that time. And she's talking to her father, and he's saying whatever he was saying. As a parent, I could say black and he'd say white, and I could say yes and he'd say no, or I'd say no and he'd say yes. It was every opportunity to undermine me as a parent was done, whether it be by himself or by his family. His mommy's crazy, remember. Even though I had reasonable parenting techniques or whatever, it didn't matter. So charges were dropped. Now we got to figure out how we're going to live as a family. He still wanted me back. He still tried to keep, part I've missed. Yes. I had access to the kids prior to that. Now remember, he supposedly did all this by accident, and he didn't mean to any of this to happen, and this is what he's telling me. And so one time, I picked the kids up from school, and I dropped them off at the house, and I saw a neighbor. This is backing up to January of 2018. And I dropped them off, and a neighbor, a close friend, who I'd known since I moved in there, into that house, saw me, and I saw him, and he flagged me down. I pull over, and he starts talking to me. And this is within distance of my house, so like the ex could see everything going on, clear as day. And the neighbor gets into the car with me because it's cold, it's January, and we start talking, and I told him what's happened, and he couldn't believe it. And he's talking to me, and I'm explaining the whole situation and how bad it is, and that, I can only talk for a few minutes. And in my rearview mirror, I see X walking up with his phone in his hand. Remember, he's supposedly remorseful and regretful of everything he did, and he's going to get the charges dropped at any second. And he's got the phone in his hand, recording me sitting on the side of our street and yelling while I'm talking to my neighbor, yelling, "She's not supposed to be here. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to give this to the lawyers." Meanwhile, I'm not doing anything wrong other than talking to my neighbor and trying to explain why I disappeared all of a sudden and why he saw me being arrested on the street when he did. And my neighbor is saying, "Oh, you ignore him. I go, "No, I can't." I was in such total fear, terror. I had to kick my neighbor out of my car and say, "You gotta go. He's gonna call the police. Leave me alone. You gotta go. I gotta get going. I gotta get out of here." And I could see X with the camera in his hand, holding it, recording it, and hear him screaming at me, and my neighbor's like, "What the hell?" And I go, "Yeah, this is what's going on. Get out." And so that's evidence right there that he wanted to destroy me in January of 2018. But yet he's the hero. He tells me afterwards that he's the hero of this story because he saved me from going to jail for 2 years. I'm sorry. Now that's an MPD trait. That is such an MPD trait. Yeah. So the charges were dropped, and I have to figure out how we're going to live through this. Of course, I was never returning home after that. There was no returning to that relationship afterwards. I knew that was going to escalate even further. I knew when I started to do the research, when I started going through all the counseling and everything like that, I knew it was only going to get worse. And my family needed me. My mom needed me. I, as much as I hate saying this, but it was the truth, because I was the the glue that held it all together. I was the one that supported everybody. I was the one that paid all the bills. I was the one that was legally responsible for everything. And you take me out of that equation, and the bills aren't going to get paid. The documents aren't going to be signed. The care isn't going to be given. The everything. During that time, I had to prepare my 16-year-old. He eventually turned 17. I had to prepare him for life without any parents. I had to prepare him to take care of my mom, because there was always a chance, because everything was going so wrong at that time, there was a chance that I was going to be taken away. It's plenty of stories of innocent people behind bars. There's plenty of those stories, and the way things were looking at that time, I was going to be one of those people too. I had no way of making it out of there unless he dropped the charges. So my poor kid is saddled with responsibilities beyond his mental and emotional capacity. Everything was just too much. And then, so the charges are dropped. Now I gotta figure out, how do we live after all of that done to us? How do we get past that and make a constructive, positive environment for our children? And remember, that whole time, he's squatting in my place. I'm carrying all of those bills by myself with no income. No income. I didn't want to cause any more damage to my kids, so I agreed to him to continue forward renting my house so that my children at least have that stability. The shocking thing for me was that they were living in a completely chaotic, hoarded environment when I went to go get their things at March break. They refused to stay at the Elephant. I don't know why. I can't question anything. Some things you just have to radically accept. But I saw weapons that were easily accessible by a young child, toys that were totally age inappropriate. I saw dirt. I saw chaos everywhere, worse than anything that I had dealt with at the Elephant. And the dust was so thick on the fans that it was just dripping down. And this is what I had to accept for my children as a living environment, because Children's Aid wasn't doing anything about it. And Children's Aid did go and visit, and he kept on telling them, oh, the boxes are there because we're moving. We're going to be moving soon. So I've been packing. Like any bullshit lie that could come out of his mouth came out of his mouth. He had no intentions of moving. He was living there for free. Why would he move? So we eventually did agree to him living there and paying me rent. He came up with the rental amount. I was okay with it because it was actually more than what I was going to suggest. Except he decided that all the utilities were going to be included with the rental amount, so I didn't see that one coming. And he promised he would pay back all the legal fees that he incurred needlessly on my behalf. I have text messages that said that he'll pay me back. And of course, at that point, I wanted to sue everybody that was involved. If you go back to the story, the police for not having a female officer, for me being surrounded by men. CAS for how they dropped the ball numerous times, and caused further damage. I wanted to sue the Crown for everything that happened there. I wanted to sue him. I was so angry with how our lives were so destroyed. So destroyed. We were victims, and we had no recourse, no nothing. He was not held accountable. That's the part that really pissed me off most, is they knew he lied and it brought those charges against me falsely, and there was no retribution whatsoever. None. He promised he would pay that money back, and he incurred expenses like you wouldn't believe. And I've yet to see that money. He's now saying his story has changed, obviously. I never counted on that money. I thought maybe once in his life he'll do something good and keep a promise, maybe, but that's what got me through so many years of that relationship anyway. But yeah, of course, over $65,000 now. When you start counting interest and all the expenses incurred, I'll never see that money again from him. So that's why I'm telling my story. I'm selling it. I'm putting it on YouTube. I'm hoping that the story will either directly or indirectly create an income so that I can keep my home. The one that he stole from me for a while. The one that I was ripped away from for a while. The one that I paid all the expenses for and still pay the expenses for. The damages that he did in that night, that one freaking night, and he still turns it on me and blames me, but it was an accident, he'll say it's my fault because I wanted to leave. I wanted to give the kids a better environment. I wanted to fix what was breaking in our house. I wanted to get ahead. I wanted to prove to my kids that we don't have to live like this anymore, that I can be a better person, a stronger person, and a great role model as a mother if I didn't have to constantly do this battle out with common sense, sensibility, logical reasoning. There was shit that I was arguing about with him that I just can't even begin to describe sometimes. It was just out of this world. At one point, he didn't care if I lost my house and we had to raise our kids in low-income housing where his mother lives, where there was a shooting just the past week. There was shooting in her backyard. There were bullets flying, and I said, this is just one instance. And I go, so you want to live in a neighborhood where your kids' lives are constantly at risk with a stray bullet? This makes sense to you? As opposed to actually working harder and keeping the home that we live in. That makes more sense to you to do that. And he was all for it. He was all for me losing the house. And in hindsight, it's often that I think that he was trying to drive me into an early grave with all the actions that he did, so that mind you, I know his family, and this is not a far stretch or a far reach to say they were grifters, albeit but one. They were grifters. They were using people constantly for their benefits, and I saw it day in, day out. There's one that I say that stood on his own feet, but he had his own issues, and that's all I'll say about him. But, these people how they worked the system, how they worked people, how they knew to lie and manipulate. I swear to God to this day that he was trying to put me into an early grave so that my kids will inherit everything, including my mom's house, and he could be guardian of the kids and reap the benefits of all this. Everything I saw and experienced, I can't even describe it other than it sounds like a Hollywood movie, but it was real life. It was real freaking life. And people have asked me to write books about it, go into detail about it. And as I said in my first early videos of this series, I can't. It puts me in, if you saw today's first video, it put me into pieces. It still puts me into pieces. I can't stay in that place mentally and emotionally. I need to look forward. I need to be able to function and work, and all it does is tear me apart. And when I talk to victims, survivors. We're survivors. We're victims in the moment, but we're survivors afterwards. You can take, and this is what I want you to take from my story. You can take everything away, and you can build up again, and you can house to building up to. I had 3 Airbnbs. It's just right now what I'm going through is that unethical lender that's really messing with everything. That was a mistake. I took a bad step there. But I'm trying to recover from that, and I'm asking everybody for help. I had to start my life all over again after the charges were dropped. And we did some pretty amazing things. We, including my teams and everything that we done, my mortgage brokers, my lawyers, the good lawyers, a couple of them I could talk about on a video with that alone. We grew something pretty freaking remarkable until COVID happened. From nothing to something substantial. Even COVID, we survived for a couple of years, a year and a half, before we had to start shifting gears and making different decisions. But just know that you can do it. You can do this. You can take that first step. You can keep breathing. Sometimes all you have to do is just keep breathing. I gotta go. It's getting a little bit exciting here with the traffic, and I'm getting into the heart of it, and I got calls and messages coming in. Just know you have faith. Keep faith. Keep faith in yourself, if nothing else. Keep your feet moving in front of you. You can take a break. You can cry for a little while, but don't stay in that place. Don't stay there. I don't want to stay. I'm going to be in a bit of a state today afterwards. I got some hard shit I'm dealing with right now. And I really need to call out to all of you that see these videos. We don't need food. We're good for food. I grow. I'm a good shopper. I'm frugal. Got a big freezer. Good pantry. But keep watching my videos. I'm feeling better now. It's not the best. I got some good news to look forward to, but it's still a hard decision to make. I don't know if it's the right direction to go. I gotta weigh everything out. As an airplane flies over my head. Just, I need some big numbers really, really freaking fast now. Like, I mean, days. Days. I need some big sales. I gotta go. Please like, follow, share, comment, subscribe. Tell my story to others that you hear are going through some tough shit. Remember to laugh. When you're going through the tough shit, laugh. Force yourself to laugh. I gotta go though. I love you guys. Be good.